It had been one of those long, dragging afternoons where everything in the house felt heavier than usual. The kitchen smelled of onions and garlic as I stirred the pot mindlessly, lost in thought. The sound the door creaking open startled me. I wiped my hands on the towel tucked into my waist and turned sharply, heart already racing. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a second, I stood frozen until I heard his voice, warm and familiar. "Hey! Didn't mean to scare you, my stepson." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It had been months since I last saw him. Months since the house had heard any laughter that wasn't forced. He leaned casually against the doorway, looking a little older, a little more grounded. I didn't let my eyes linger. I smiled, masking the sudden awkwardness tightening my chest. "You should have called. I would have made something better than this." I motioned to the half-cooked meal like it was some grand apology. He laughed and stepped in, setting a duffel bag by the counter. "Just thought I'd surprise you. Missed your cooking." Something about that made my heart pinch a little. My husband hadn't said he missed anything about me in a long time. The days had blurred into duty, work, chores, sleep, repeat. No lingering kisses, no stolen moments. Just a life lived side by side, never face to face. I stirred the pot again, needing to do something with my hands. "Well, you picked a good night. I'm making your favorite." I hadn't realized I still remembered. His smile deepened, and he moved closer, peeking into the pot with an exaggerated sniff. "Still smells like heaven." The compliment landed heavier than it should have. It wasn't just about the food. I felt it in the way he looked at me, not like a boy seeing a second mother, but like a man noticing something he hadn't before. Maybe I was imagining it. God, I hoped I was imagining it. He rolled up his sleeves and washed his hands. "Let me help," he said easily, like he belonged here. I tried to object, but he was already reaching for a chopping board. I handed him a knife without thinking, brushing his fingers briefly. My skin tingled stupidly at the contact. We worked side by side, slicing, stirring, seasoning, falling into a rhythm that felt far too comfortable. He told me about his new job, about his cramped apartment, about how nobody cooked a decent meal anymore. I listened, genuinely listened, laughing when he made some snarky comment about surviving on instant noodles. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. There was a moment, somewhere between the onions and the spices, where I realized how quiet the house had become. Not the bad, empty kind of quiet. A warm, suspended kind, where even the ticking of the clock seemed to slow down. He brushed against me when reaching for a spoon, his shoulder grazing mine. It was innocent, natural, but it made my pulse skip in a way that had nothing to do with fear. I moved slightly to the side, pretending to need more room. He caught my eye, a little smile playing on his lips. Neither of us said anything. I busied myself wiping down the counter while he stirred the sauce. It was stupid how aware I was of him standing there. Stupid how I found myself noticing the way his arms moved, the easy confidence in his stance. I scolded myself silently, blaming the loneliness, the wine I hadn't even had yet, the stale air between my husband and me. He turned the heat down and bumped me gently with his hip. "You're overthinking the recipe again, aren't you?" he teased. I rolled my eyes, grateful for the break in tension, grateful for anything that let me breathe normally again. Dinner finished quicker than I expected. He poured us each a glass of wine without asking, and we sat at the small kitchen island, elbows almost touching, the space between us too narrow, too charged. I sipped my glass, letting the warmth of it seep into me. He was telling a story about his friends and a disastrous camping trip, animated and laughing. I listened not so much to the story but to the sound of him. How much he had grown into himself. How he spoke without the boyish hesitations he used to have. I caught myself smiling more than once, smiling the way a woman does when she's seen. It was dangerous, that kind of smiling. At one point, he reached over and brushed a strand of hair from my face, the gesture so sudden, so tender that I forgot how to breathe. He seemed to realize it at the same moment I did. His fingers pausing for a second longer than they should have. Then he pulled back, clearing his throat, pretending nothing had happened. Pretended to. What else could I do? The clock on the wall ticked louder now. I stood abruptly, gathering the empty glasses. You must be tired after the drive, I said, my voice too bright, too brittle. He hesitated before nodding, leaning back in his chair, watching me with an unreadable expression. I rinsed the glasses, feeling the weight of his gaze on my back, burning through the fabric of my shirt. When I turned around, he wasn't staring anymore. He was looking down, fiddling with his phone, giving me back a sliver of the normalcy we had so easily lost. You can take the guest room, I said, drying my hands. Thanks, he said, smiling again, but this time it didn't quite reach his eyes. I nodded and forced myself to walk away, heart thudding against my ribs. In the hallway mirror I caught my reflection. Flushed cheeks, trembling hands, wide, guilty eyes. A woman on the verge of something she couldn't name yet, but already feared. Upstairs behind closed doors I told myself it was nothing. Just a long day. Just a little too much wine. Just a little too much loneliness. But deep down I knew. I had felt it in the kitchen, in the accidental touches, in the way my body leaned closer even when my mind screamed to pull away. I crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling, the house creaking softly around me. Somewhere downstairs he was unpacking his bag, maybe scrolling through his phone, maybe replaying the same electric moments that haunted me now. Sleep wouldn't come easy tonight. And a part of me wasn't sure I wanted it. The next morning, sunlight bled into the kitchen through half-closed blinds. I moved mechanically, setting out coffee mugs, pretending I hadn't barely slept. Pretending I hadn't replayed every second from last night in the dark. I was pouring coffee when I heard his steps. He looked rested, fresh, too at ease compared to the knots twisting inside me. Smells good, he said, voice low and easy. I offered a tight smile and pushed a mug toward him. Our fingers brushed again, neither of us reacting this time. Maybe pretending it didn't happen made it harmless. Maybe. We sipped in silence for a while, a quiet not quite comfortable. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me like he was waiting for something. I opened the fridge just to have something to do. You want eggs or something? I asked, already reaching for a carton. Anything you make's fine, he said, a half smirk in his voice that made my skin prickle. I cooked while he stayed nearby, too nearby. His hand casually brushed against my back when he moved past me. I flinched inside but didn't show it. Breakfast was quick. Conversation was easier when it was shallow. Weather, traffic, random gossip about old neighbors. I clung to it, desperate for the safety of small talk. But every now and then, our eyes would meet, and something would pulse between us, strong enough to shake me. He volunteered to wash the dishes. I dried them without thinking, both of us working too closely again, elbows knocking. A dropped spoon clattered to the floor. I bent to grab it, and so did he. Our faces ended up inches apart, breaths mingling. I froze, the air thick and heavy between us. His eyes locked on mine, unblinking. For a moment, neither of us moved. The logical part of me screamed to straighten up, to laugh it off, to put space between us. But my body betrayed me, leaning in the slightest bit, drawn like a moth to flame. His hand brushed my hair back behind my ear, the same way he had the night before, slow and deliberate. I stumbled back, spoon in hand, laughing awkwardly. Clumsy, I mumbled, voice shaking. He gave a small smile but said nothing. The silence roared between us. I set the spoon down and wiped my hands, heart hammering. He finished washing, dried his own hands, and leaned against the sink, studying me. His gaze wasn't shy or apologetic. It was patient, knowing, like he could feel the unraveling happening inside me, and he was just waiting for me to admit it. I grabbed the mail from the counter, desperate to look busy. Bills, ads, nothing important. He took a step closer, slow and unhurried. I didn't move away. Couldn't. You okay? he asked, voice low. I nodded too quickly. Fine. Just a lot on my mind. He didn't press. He didn't have to. Everything unsaid was screaming in the air between us. After a beat, he pushed off the counter. Come on, he said. Let's get out of the house for a bit. The offer shocked me into stillness. Leave the house. With him. It was reckless. Stupid. But the idea of sitting here, suffocating in my own guilt and temptation, was worse. All right, I said, forcing a casual tone. Where to? We ended up driving aimlessly, windows cracked open, letting the spring air whip through the car. No destination, just movement. It was easier not to think when the world blurred by. We pointed out old landmarks, shared a few easy laughs, and somewhere along the way, the tension shifted from unbearable to something almost familiar, almost safe. He pulled into a park eventually, some forgotten strip of green we used to visit years ago. We walked along the empty paths, side by side, not touching but closer than strangers should be. He asked about my life. Not in the casual, polite way people ask out of obligation, but really asked. What I wanted, what I missed, what I dreamed about. No one had asked me those things in a long, long time. I answered honestly, surprising myself. I told him about the parts of me that had been gathering dust, about the dreams I had packed away in boxes labeled, maybe someday. He listened, really listened, his attention heavy and warm, making my words pour out faster than I intended. When I finally stopped talking, embarrassed by how much I'd revealed, he said quietly, "You deserve more." Simple words. No agenda. Just a fact he saw clearly, even when I had long stopped believing it myself. The dam inside me cracked a little more. We sat on a worn-out bench, the late afternoon sun throwing long shadows across the grass. A few kids played in the distance, their laughter faint. He sat close enough that our knees brushed. I should have moved. I should have stood up and insisted we leave. Instead I stayed. He turned slightly toward me, his hand brushing against mine on the bench. A light touch, tentative, waiting for permission. I didn't pull away. My fingers curled toward his instinctively, brushing against his knuckles. He laced his fingers through mine, slow and deliberate, giving me 1,000 chances to stop him. I didn't. For a moment we just sat there, holding hands like it was the most natural thing in the world, like it wasn't dangerous and wrong and electric. A breeze kicked up and I shivered. He noticed immediately, pulling his jacket off and draping it around my shoulders. His hand lingered a moment longer on my back, the weight of it grounding me and unmooring me all at once. I tilted my head to look at him, heart hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. His eyes searched mine, not asking, not assuming, just waiting. I thought about my husband, about the vows I'd made, about the woman I was supposed to be. And I thought about the way my chest ached under the weight of being unseen for so long. I didn't lean in. I didn't have to. The air between us cracked and sizzled, and he moved first, his forehead resting lightly against mine. No kiss, not yet. Just breath shared in the small space we dared to create. It would have been so easy to close the distance, to fall into the want pulsing between us. But the sound of a child's laugh nearby snapped me back like a slap. I pulled away sharply, heart racing, guilt crashing down. He let me go without protest, his hand sliding from mine, slow and understanding. Neither of us spoke. We walked back to the car in silence, the space between us colder now but somehow more dangerous than ever. I stared out the window on the drive home, hands clenched in my lap, fighting the tears burning behind my eyes. What scared me most wasn't what almost happened. It was how badly I had wanted it. The ride home was heavy, each mile pressing harder against the fragile wall we had tried to rebuild. I stared ahead, pretending to be lost in thought, pretending not to notice the way he kept glancing at me, like he was searching for something I didn't know how to give. The house looked the same as we left it, but stepping inside felt different, as if everything inside already knew the line we had almost crossed. I headed straight for the kitchen, needing a task, a distraction. He followed but kept his distance. I poured 2 glasses of water, setting one down for him without a word. My hands shook slightly, the glass clinking against the counter louder than it should have. He didn't comment, just watched me with that same steady patience that made it impossible to hide. I finally forced myself to look at him. The silence between us wasn't angry or awkward. It was dense with everything we were too afraid to say. I wanted to tell him it couldn't happen. I wanted to say that last night was a mistake, today was a mistake, that nothing could come from this. But my mouth wouldn't form the words. Because some dark, buried part of me didn't believe them. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, giving me space to run if I wanted. I didn't move. I hated how easily my body betrayed my better judgment, how every nerve seemed tuned to him now. His hand brushed lightly over mine, just fingertips, asking a silent question. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in shaky and shallow. When I opened them, he was closer, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of him. I whispered his name without meaning to, barely audible, a desperate anchor to something slipping away. He heard it. His hand moved up, ghosting along my arm, a touch so light it made me shiver. I should have pulled away, but instead I leaned into it, craving the warmth, the human contact that had been missing from my life for too long. The first real touch came like a sigh between us. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb stroking gently across my skin. I tilted my face into his palm before I could stop myself, a small sound escaping my lips, something broken and longing. That was all it took. He closed the distance, slow enough to give me every chance to say no, fast enough that I didn't have time to think. Our lips brushed, tentative at first, an exploration, a question. My body answered before my mind could catch up. I kissed him back, desperate, aching, every ounce of loneliness and need pouring out of me. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me closer, and I let him, clinging to the safety of his strength. The kiss deepened, growing hungrier, more urgent, years of neglect and isolation unraveling in seconds. I should have stopped. I should have pushed him away, screamed, run. But all I could do was pull him closer, anchoring myself to the only thing that felt real anymore. He broke the kiss first, resting his forehead against mine, breathing hard. His hands cradled my face like something precious, something fragile. I felt the weight of his restraint, how hard he was fighting to let me decide. I opened my eyes and saw the question there, raw and unguarded. I answered it without words, sliding my hands up his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart under my palms. His hands dropped to my waist, gripping tightly like he was afraid I might vanish. I guided him, needing him to understand, needing this moment to be real, if only for tonight. We stumbled blindly toward the living room, hands tangled, mouths desperate. Every touch was a breaking point, every breath a silent confession. His jacket slipped from my shoulders, forgotten on the floor. I didn't care. All I cared about was the way he looked at me, like I was the only thing that mattered. He whispered my name, reverent and broken, and I answered with his, a plea, a surrender. There was no hesitation anymore, no guilt strong enough to dam the flood we had unleashed, only need raw and consuming. Clothes became obstacles, discarded without thought. Skin met skin, the shock of it jolting through me like electricity. His hands explored reverently, memorizing, worshipping. I gasped against his neck, overwhelmed by the intensity, by the way he made me feel alive again. Every kiss, every touch stripped away the years of feeling invisible, unwanted. Under his hands, I wasn't just a wife, a stepmother, a woman past her prime. I was seen, desired, loved even if it was wrong. He moved carefully, treating me like something he cherished, not something he was stealing. Our bodies fit together naturally, perfectly, like we had been made for this moment and had spent years finding our way back to it. I cried out, not from pain, but from the sheer force of emotion crashing through me. He held me through it, whispering broken reassurances against my skin. His own body trembling with the effort to stay gentle, to honor the sacred wrongness of what we were doing. It wasn't rough or frantic. It was slow, aching, desperate to memorize every second before reality ripped it away. When it was over, we lay tangled together, breathless and silent, the weight of what we had done settling around us. I traced lazy patterns on his chest, afraid to look him in the eye, afraid of the guilt waiting there. But when I finally glanced up, there was no regret in his gaze. Only a fierce tenderness that made my throat tighten painfully. He brushed his fingers over my hair, my shoulder, my back, soothing and grounding me when my own mind threatened to spiral. I wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize, but he shook his head slightly, silencing me with a kiss to my forehead. Whatever this was, whatever it meant, it was ours for now. Unspoken and fragile and doomed, but ours. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. The world beyond these walls would come crashing in soon enough, demanding answers, assigning blame. But for this moment, with his arms around me and my heart finally beating in time with someone else's, I allowed myself the luxury of not caring. Not yet. Morning came too soon. Pale light leaked through the windows, throwing everything into harsh relief. I woke tangled in the blanket, my body sore in ways that reminded me it hadn't been a dream. His scent clung to my skin, a bittersweet reminder of everything we had done. For a moment, I let myself lie there, suspended in the quiet, wishing the world could pause indefinitely. But reality gnawed at the edges of my mind, sharp and relentless. I slipped out of bed carefully, heart hammering. My legs wobbled under me as I gathered my clothes, moving like a thief in my own house. I didn't dare look back at him. If I did, I might crumble. I dressed quickly, each button, each zipper a small act of self-preservation. When I finally glanced over, he was awake, watching me. His expression was unreadable, neither regret nor expectation, just a heavy knowing that stole the air from my lungs. I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, everything would spill out, the guilt, the fear, the desperate, aching truth of what I still wanted. He didn't try to stop me. He only offered a small nod, a silent understanding that this couldn't be spoken aloud. Not now, maybe not ever. I turned away before I could lose my nerve, slipping out of the room and into the hallway where the house still smelled faintly of breakfast and burnt coffee. In the kitchen, I busied myself with meaningless tasks. Wiping down counters that were already clean, stacking dishes we hadn't used. Anything to feel normal again. My hands trembled. Every sound seemed too loud, every movement too sharp, like the world itself was punishing me. I kept expecting the front door to swing open, for my husband to appear, for reality to crash down with no warning. But the house stayed still, suspended in a fragile, unbearable peace. He joined me after a while, moving carefully, keeping a respectful distance. We didn't touch. We didn't speak. It was safer that way. I handed him a cup of coffee without meeting his eyes. He accepted it, his fingers brushing mine by accident, sending a jolt through me so sharp I nearly dropped the mug. We sat at opposite ends of the kitchen table, the space between us a chasm filled with all the things we couldn't say. I stared into my coffee, the bitter steam stinging my eyes. Every instinct screamed at me to undo it, to pretend it hadn't happened, to bury it deep enough that it could never claw its way back into the light. But pretending wouldn't erase the truth burned into my skin, my bones, my heart. I broke the silence first, my voice low and raw. We can't. This can't happen again. He nodded slowly, the hurt flickering through his eyes too fast to catch unless you were looking for it. I saw it and it gutted me. He didn't argue. He didn't make promises. He simply accepted it because he understood better than anyone that wanting something didn't make it right. The silence stretched again, taut and brittle. I needed him to leave. I needed space to think, to breathe, to try and remember who I was before last night blurred the lines. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Driving him away felt like carving out a part of myself I hadn't realized I still needed. Finally he stood, setting his empty mug in the sink with a care that broke my heart more than if he'd slammed it down. He lingered for a moment like he was memorizing the sight of me, the way the morning light touched my hair, the tremble in my hands I couldn't hide. Without a word, he walked to the door. I stayed frozen at the table, every muscle screaming to call him back, to apologize, to beg him to stay. But I stayed silent, swallowing the lump in my throat, clutching my coffee like it could anchor me to the life I had just shattered. The door clicked shut behind him, and the sound echoed through the empty house like a final verdict. I sat there long after he was gone, numb and hollow. The guilt came crashing down then, relentless and sharp. I thought about my husband, about the life we had built, the vows I had made. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who would have been horrified by what I had done. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall, silent and scalding, a pitiful attempt at penance. But even through the guilt, the shame, the self-loathing, a tiny, treacherous part of me clung to the memory of his touch, the way he had looked at me like I mattered. I hated myself for it. I hated how easily I had fallen, how much I still wanted to fall again. The hours crawled by. I showered, scrubbing my skin until it burned, as if I could erase the evidence of last night. I changed into fresh clothes, put on makeup, forced myself to become the version of myself everyone expected to see. Smiling, composed, in touch. By the time my husband came home, I was ready. I greeted him with a kiss, laughing at some small joke he made, slipping back into my role with the ease of long practice. He didn't notice anything was different. He didn't notice how stiff my smile was, how forced my laugh sounded. He didn't notice the way my hands shook when I served him dinner, or the way my eyes darted to the door every time it creaked. He didn't notice because he had stopped seeing me a long time ago. Later that night, lying beside him in bed, I stared at the ceiling, feeling like a ghost in my own life. His breathing deepened into sleep within minutes. I listened to it, the steady rise and fall, the sound of a life untouched by the storm that had wrecked me. I closed my eyes and saw him, my stepson, standing in the kitchen doorway, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in years. Recognition. A single tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly, as if even the darkness could judge me. I had crossed a line I could never uncross. No amount of pretending could change that. I would carry it with me, buried deep beneath the mask I wore for the world. A secret shame and a secret thrill, coiled together in a knot I would never fully untangle. In the morning I would get up. I would make breakfast. I would smile and laugh and be the woman everyone thought I was. But tonight, in the silence, I let myself mourn the pieces of myself I had lost, and the pieces I had found, however broken and wrong they might be. Because even in the quiet shame, even in the raw, aching guilt, I knew the truth. A part of me would always belong to him now. And no matter how hard I tried, I would never get it back.